Welcome into episode 69 of the Godly Young Men podcast. On this episode, we're going to be discussing a difficult topic, actually. We've had this one in the tank for a little bit. We've kicked it around a little bit. And this is one of those that when you know it, you know it. When you see it, you see it. But it's a little bit difficult to define. And so I finally did just sit down and start defining what I was trying to get apart, or what I was trying to impart and get across in this episode. And that is discussing mama's boys. It is something that we're seeing actually a lot more of, I would say, in today's day and age, where you're seeing guys that are just kind of wimps. They're Jimmy whipped. They're, the reason that this is kind of an issue, and one of the reasons we want to talk about it, is we're seeing a lot of marriages where there's wimpy guys in the marriage. We're seeing a lot of young boys who are failing to take risks, things like that. So we're going to get into some of the hallmarks of this, but why it's an issue just right off the top is I do think, and I'll let you get into this, I do think it subverts biblical authority.
Yeah, so as we introduce this idea of mama's boys, Joe's correct. I think a lot of people probably know it when you see it, and especially you see it in young boys, let's say 8 and below. It's the little boy that always runs to his mom as soon as there's a little bit of conflict, maybe with another kid, or something doesn't go his way on the baseball field or basketball court or whatever. They're immediately running to their mom and, crying, and, they want their mom's comfort, right? You see that in young kids. Where we are seeing that continue, as Joe brought up, is in older young men as well. Like, again, into their teens and even into their 20s and into their 30s, of like constantly their whole world is shaped by their mother. And some people might be listening to this going, okay, why is that a big deal? Moms are super important, and mom's development, the mother's development on the child is super important. Of course it is. I would argue, and I think Joe could probably speak to this part a little bit more, that the early developmental years is more the motherhood's development, or the mom's development on the child is more important. Especially for young men, once you hit about 9, 10, 11, I do firmly believe that switches over to where the father's input and the father's development on the child is way more important, again, especially for guys. And one of the things that, as Joe kind of prefaced for us here, biblically speaking, I've referenced Ephesians 6:4 before, where it says, you fathers do not provoke your children to wrath. It doesn't say mothers. It doesn't say parents. It says, and you fathers do not provoke your children to wrath. A father's role, as we've discussed in many an episode before, in making sure that their child stays faithful and making sure that a young man turns into a godly young man, turns into a successful individual, the father's importance in that is so much higher, in my opinion, than the mother's, especially when it comes to guys. And so when you have a bunch of young men who are mama's boys, who are constantly running to mom, who are constantly trying to kind of appease their mom and everything, it does kind of subvert the biblical importance of fathers shaping their sons. Mama's boys are shaped by their mothers. Again, even in their teenage and 20s and 30s even, mama's boys are shaped by their mothers. What I read from the Bible, what I read from, again, Ephesians 6, you read a lot of the Proverbs, you read a lot of just what biblical fatherhood is all about. The fathers are the ones that are supposed to be shaping their sons. Mama's boys, that's not the case.
And we lack testosterone in this day and age because women simply lack they are unable to preach and to teach what we need as young men.
Masculine character traits.
We're talking confidence. We're talking competition. We're talking saying the hard things. Everything we've discussed on this podcast, that's not to say that women can't theoretically, but they're not wired that way to think about really taking on major risks. They're not wired about, thinking about the spirit of competition, how important it is to compete in some areas, or how important it is to just stand up and say things that nobody wants to say.
I would liken it to a father trying to teach their daughter about, the struggles of childbirth. You've never really been through that.
Right.
It's
theoretically, he can.
You can speak to it theoretically, like you're saying, but yeah, you can't. You're not designed that way.
Right. And so what do we see? We see an entire generation of, I'm sorry, but wimps. Kids that would rather stay on the video games and that would run to their mom first thing, or that the mom coddles them, or whatever it may be. And this is an issue. This is a major issue that we're seeing. We've talked about it before. I think it's a hikikomori is what they call them, if I remember right. Over in Japan, they got like 3 million kids that will not get out of their parents' basement. And you know who it is that is mainly paying for them and is mainly providing food for them? The moms. So they're coddled in a lot of ways, and this is kind of one of the biggest issues is moms cannot call them to step up because moms coddle in a lot of ways.
Well,
I shouldn't say cannot, but a lot of times they will not.
Well, and you already brought up the marriage aspect of this. As we've stated on episodes before, we firmly believe that you as a husband, you as a father, should step up and lead in your marriage, not follow, not just be along for the ride, but actually lead in your marriage. When you're raised as a mama's boy, we're going to get into more details of it, but that's very difficult to do because your entire world has been raised of like trying to keep mom happy, trying to make mom happy. And when you get married, that typically gets transferred over to your wife. And so it's really difficult for you to lead in your marriage, to lead as a husband, lead as a father when you've been raised in this mama's boy mentality. And so go ahead.
But let me just say this before we get right into this, because you're already getting into some really good hallmarks.
Sorry, I'm jumping the gun.
You're all good. You're all good because I was about to take it in. And it's like, hold on a second before we do, because I was about to go off with you on it. Like, oh, wait, we have one more point, which is, please understand this. We are not saying guys and males should not have great relationships with their mothers.
Right.
We are not saying that it's okay for a guy to treat his mother like garbage or to not have a good relationship.
Or to not care about what his mother thinks.
To not care about what his mother thinks or to not care about the relationship at all. Oh, well, I'm masculine. I don't need a mom. Yes, you do. She birthed you. You absolutely need a mom. She's loving. She's the support. She's all the things she's supposed to be. Moms are fantastic. And you know, it's Mother's Day coming up. And by the time this drops, it's going to be past Mother's Day. We love our moms and we uphold them. And our wives are both mothers. And they are incredibly, incredibly needed. But it's still wrong to be a mama's boy. And so we're going to get into what that looks like.
We're going to get into what that looks like because we were talking off air, you know, Joe and I would say I do as well, have a great relationship with our mom. Being a mama's boy does not mean you have a great relationship with your mom. Like, again, that's a good thing. That's not what being, it doesn't mean that, you know, a mama's boy is not somebody who just treats their mom really well. You should always treat your mom really well. That's just kind of a basic characteristic of being a guy, being a godly young man. Hey, treat your mom really well for everything that she's done for you. Have a great relationship with her.
No doubt.
That's not what we're talking about. Joe, what are we talking about when we say mama's boy? What are some hallmarks of a mama's boy?
First things first, actually, is that you have poor relationships with other men. And this is what sparked this episode for me. As I was thinking about it, and it's like, man, that kid's it just seems like a mama's boy. And I can't remember who it was. And maybe it was not the nicest thought, but I remember thinking he is completely lost when it comes to male relationships. He only gravitates toward women because women make him feel safe, women make him feel secure, women make him feel all the good things. And so I do work with this actually a lot with sex addicts in my line of work as a therapist, and specifically in specializing in that. I see a lot of guys, they have zero ability to have a relationship with a guy in terms of just healthy competition and healthy friendships and everything else. They're intimidated by them. And most of the time, this is a strained relationship with the father. It comes from you not having a good relationship with your dad. Where do you find solace? Where do you find comfort? Where do you run to for advice? Where do you run to get help in things? Your mom. And so you get used to your mom being your confidant, your mom being your rock, your mom being the person who helps you through every emotional issue. And on the one hand, moms are more than happy to stand up and do it because they're great and they're moms and they're prone to helping us. And at some point that turns into enabling and coddling, and we never really do have to work through the issues with our dad. And so as we grow up, we continue to have other relationship issues with men. We can't look men in the eye. We feel very insecure as we walk into a room. We're very intimidated, right? I have on here, which I'm going to skip to this one, let you get to the next one. But I have on here, intimidated by alpha males. You know, you got a really strong-willed guy or somebody who's just kind of, again, a type A personality alpha male, and very off-put by that. Like, oh, man, they're intimidated. Why? Because they gravitate toward the feminine, toward the mom, right? They're a mama's boy.
What's interesting about this, 2 episodes ago, we did the Don't Be That Guy episode, and one of the ones was Don't Be the Tone Police. The reason that being a mama's boy can be a problem is because being a tone policer is typically a feminine trait.
That's so true.
It's typically something that women do, are kind of constantly listening for the tone, and I mean, how's that going to make people feel? Is that going to offend anybody? This is where a lot of guys can become the tone police guy of like, yeah, the content of what they said is correct, but I just really don't like the way they said it. Can come from being a mama's boy. Because
they get brownie points with women.
They get brownie points with the women. They're so concerned about what are women going to think. And so that's a very feminine trait. And again, I guess one of the biggest issues with being a mama's boy is you tend to adopt and embody more of the feminine traits if you are a mama's boy. And that's one of them, is being the tone police. But more hallmark show. I'm going to skip number 3, let you come back to it, because the next one is the one that I want to talk about. Mama's boys typically don't take any risks whatsoever. In fact, I would say mama's boys are typically not really concerned with progress or with productivity. They're more interested in security. They want to be secure. Once again, a very feminine trait, to want to be secure, to want to have security, to want to be around people that make them feel secure, as Joe already referenced. A more masculine trait is typically somebody who is a little bit more or less risk averse. They're willing to take some risks. They want to see progress in things. They want to see productivity rather than just, let me just stay here in my little shell and stay and be comfortable in what I know. I'm never going to branch out, venture out. That's not a masculine trait. It's a feminine trait. But mama's boys, because of, again, the fact that they don't want to take risks, they're not going to make as much progress in their life. They're not going to be as productive in their life. Once again, they're embodying those feminine traits.
Women find security in others, which is why they're helpmeets. This is why, in the hierarchy of things, a man is to be at the top of the home. The woman is to submit, is because a woman finds her security in what a man can provide or what her husband can provide.
Sure.
So he provides financially for her, there's security there. He provides spiritually for her. This is why we call all of us godly young men to be the best we can be in our homes, is because we are very much supposed to give them security. Who gives us? We give ourselves security. We find it in Christ, obviously, but we're supposed to feel secure in who we are, secure in our manhood, secure in what we're able to accomplish. Women a lot of times struggle with their insecurity, but we can come in and we can cocoon. I'm not saying a woman can never find it in herself. By and large, they don't. By and large, a woman is looking to others or looking to, and I think she can find it in a man a lot of times, to help her feel secure in who she is. A man is to find that internally. A man is to be secure in his work ethic, is to be secure in his relationship with God, is to be secure to the point where he doesn't need everybody to think super well of him. He doesn't really care because he's secure in who he is. And this is the issue with mama's boys, is they're not secure in who they are, and so they do what a mama might do, which is find security in other people. And it goes back to the last point of the men. They don't find security in men. They find security with women.
Yeah.
And that can really get carried away in the sex addiction realm of things. But just in general, you don't want to take risks, to your point. You don't take risks that are needed. Your family needs you to step up and take risks, but you're really more concerned about security, because that's where you get the warm and fuzzy, just as your mom did. Another one I'd add on here is they stay close to the mom or their wife when entering a room.
It's kind of a visible hallmark.
It's a visible
hallmark.
hallmark.
Yeah.
They don't branch out very much. They don't go over and start the conversation with somebody else. They kind of stand to the back. And this person, their wife or their mom, is their security blanket in a way. And so I know as long as I'm close to this person, I don't drift too far away. If she needs me, I'm right there, which makes us feel like we're chivalrous in some way, because, well, she needs me and therefore I went and got something, instead of...
In reality, you need her.
Correct. That's exactly it. You're just waiting for her to need you so you can need, because you need her to need you. That's a mama's boy. That's not somebody who goes out and when he goes into a room, he's confident in who he is. You don't have to be Mr. We've talked about it before, and don't be that guy. Mr. Play the room and everybody just thinks you're incredible and everybody thinks you're a know-it-all or whatever it may be. Or Mr. Perfect. You don't need to be that guy either, but you do need to have the confidence to step out in that room and not, because you'll see this with 14-year-old kids. And you see this a lot in the homeschool world. I'm just going to call it as I see it. The homeschool community has a ton of mama's boys, where
we're the biggest homeschool supporters and advocates out there. But he's exactly right. This
absolutely
is all over the homeschool community.
We were homeschooled. I will homeschool all of my kids, and I will tell everybody that I talk to, homeschool your kids. But this is a problem, and a lot of times because the dad's aloof, right? But you walk into a room, how many 14-year-old homeschool boys do you see that really struggle to kind of venture away? They don't necessarily go play sports with the other kids after church on Wednesday night, or they don't go do X, Y, Z. They kind of stay close to their mom, and they hover a little bit, and then their mom's like, we're ready to go. Okay, we're ready to go. You need to be taking risks. I'm not saying you should be disobeying your mom in any way, but you ought to be confident enough to enter a room away from your mom, and especially as a guy, away from your wife.
So let me bring up another one here as far as, once again, hallmarks of mama's boys. It's guys that are just constantly looking to please the women in their life. Constantly looking to appease the women in their life. Again, when they're younger, it's their mother. And as I brought up earlier, when they get married, that gets transferred over to their wife. And so what that results in is a marriage where the husband is making every single decision based off of, how's my wife going to react to this? And if she's going to react poorly, maybe I shouldn't make this decision. That's such a terrible way to go about decision making, especially as a man.
Yep.
You need to go about decision making based on, is this the right decision? Is this the correct decision? Sure, you can take your wife, or again, if you're younger, your mother, into account, but that shouldn't be the determining factor. For a mama's boy, that is the determining factor, is how are they going to react? Is this going to please them? And if it's not, man, I'm probably not going to make the decision. Where you really see this is in Church of Christ pulpits.
Yeah, oh man.
I'm going to call it like I see it. Very rarely is any trait that is typically a woman trait ever preached about. Guys are usually beat up on in the pulpit. All the jokes are made about husbands and men, and I don't think I've ever heard a joke that is targeted at females, because that's not going to please them. And so what you hear once again is guys, preachers even, who will not say hard truths. They won't speak tough things. They won't say things that might offend people. Why? It's because this trait right here is informing the way that they preach. They want to please. They want to appease. They don't want to say anything that might upset or hurt anybody's feelings because, again, they've been raised in a world where everything is about pleasing their mother, pleasing their wife, pleasing the women in their life. Terrible way to go about making decisions about what you're going to preach on or anything like that.
Right. Doing what's right ought to be the first thing.
Correct.
Right. Saying the needed truths. What does this congregation need me to hear? I've heard preacher stories where, hey, brother, when you go to preach, you just need to know little Miss So-and-so kind of runs the congregation. So just make sure you stay on her good side. Why would you tell a young preacher that? Yeah. Other than make sure that you toe the line as a nice little boy would do, which is very much a mama's boy thing. Like, no, I can't hurt the women in my life. It's not about hurting them. It's about preaching truth. And if they get hurt by that, maybe they needed to hear it. So be bold enough to do that. And another hallmark we had on here is you never disagree with mom. I think it's okay to disagree with your wife. I think it's okay to disagree with your mom. How you go about handling that disagreement does tell you whether you're a boy or a man. I think a man is somebody who is willing to have this open dialogue, right? But he also stands his ground. He doesn't just back off at the first sign like, okay, I'm sorry, yes, ma'am, yes, dear, yes, dear. No, you stand your ground, right? You stand up, and you're not just taking them like you want to please your wife. Yes, you want to do things for your wife, but it's done out of a sense, not out of a sense of duty or a sense of like, this is my job in life, is just to please my wife. No, I will please my wife because God has called me to please my wife in certain ways, but I'm also not going to get run over in my marriage because I'm afraid she might leave me, or I'm afraid she might be upset at me, or I'm afraid of the issues, kind of the up and down issues that take place in the marriage anytime I actually say what I need to say. I saw it with my parents. My dad was kind of a jerk and he treated my mom poorly, and I just never want to be that. That's a problem. That's a problem if you're just running from who your dad was. Just because you stand up to your wife doesn't make you a bad husband. It doesn't make you your dad either. But that's, again, a hallmark of a mama's boy is they're very afraid of being their dad, and so they swing the pendulum to the other side where they never say any harsh truths or hard truths because, again, it comes down to they're just looking to please.
Well, yeah, whether it's a man or a woman, it's just making your decision based off of what is XYZ person going to think.
Yeah.
Well, again, whether that's a man, whether that's a woman, doesn't matter. Don't make your decisions based off of that. So practically, what is this? Well, I guess you got two more on here that we need to get to as far as hallmarks. So we'll speed. I'll give both of these, and then Joe, I'll let you give your take. One of them is kind of unwilling to get their hands dirty, and this is in a very physical sense. Manual labor, right. Don't like blue collar jobs. Don't like to do anything that requires a lot of exertion. And then they're typically coddled by their mother. You already spoke to the homeschool point of this. You see this a ton where the mom really does coddle the son and, thinks that their son is the greatest thing on earth. And so that endears the son towards the mom. And it's just, again, have a great relationship with your mom. It's really important. You don't want to be coddled by your mom. That's just not a good thing. So what are your thoughts on this?
The only thing I'd add to the coddle part is, you see these 23-year-old kids, they're going nowhere. The dad is inclined to just kick them out the door. You need to go get yourself a job. You need to get it on your own, and you need to make it as a man. That's what happened to them, and that's what's happened literally the last 15 generations before them. But somehow the mom now, because she rules the home, gets to pump the brakes on it and go, no, but poor little Johnny, he's just had it tough.
Why do you think there's 28-year-olds living in their parents' basement? You think the dad's making that decision? Of course not.
Right. Most of the time, it's the mom. Now, before you throw arrows or shoot arrows at us and throw tomatoes at us, we realize the economy is difficult. We realize there's a lot of 28-year-olds living with their parents because they are trying to make ends meet. It's a tough world out there. I'm not taking away from it. But how many of those were coddled by their mom when it counted, when they should have been out earning, 5 years? If from 23 to 28, you had 5 years experience in a really tough job where it went to the grind, right? I mean, it was just grind day in and day out, but you had 5 years experience in a job that actually mattered. By 28, you're probably out on your own.
Yeah.
The problem is, that was really, really tough. That job just had me work difficult hours, or that job was this, or that job was that. And so you quit the job.
Didn't work out for me.
Yeah. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry that didn't work out for you. No, stick it out. You made the commitment. I don't care if the hours are difficult. I don't care if the job is difficult. You need experience in some area. So by the time you're 28, you can move out of my house. That's what a dad would do. The mama's boys are more than content to be coddled by their mom.
Yeah.
To be coddled by their mom, where they get to stay in the nice, cozy, warm, fuzzy, bedroom that they have, where they play their video games for 12 hours a day and send out 2 resumes a month. No. we're men. We step up and we do manly things. We do hard things. And part of that is we leave the house when we need to. Maybe not 18. I'm not big into that. We leave the house when we need to, so we're not coddled by our mom. We have a really healthy relationship.
So
with
what does this practically look like? Some of these are a little bit
Yep.
theoretical. Again, with the intimidated by alpha males and the coddled by their mother, that might be a little bit difficult to tangibly grasp. Practically, though, what does this look like? Typically, mama's boys are, and again, generalization. Let's give all the qualifiers here. This is not always the case, but a lot of the time, this is the case. They're usually not big into sports. Why? Confrontation, competition, a little bit of friction.
Yep.
Mama's boys aren't big fans of that. So they're typically not big sports guys. They don't like to go play sports. They don't like to watch sports. Again, bit of a feminine trait there. They're typically not big into working out. This is the Godly Young Men podcast, the gym podcast. We are very big advocates of that. They typically aren't into that. And why are they typically not into that? Because it's difficult. Yeah. It's tough. It requires self-discipline. It requires a level of, this is uncomfortable and I'm going to push through it. Mama's boys, typically, that's not something that is a trait of theirs. And then thirdly, and this ties into it, they're not big on physically demanding things. Joe already spoke to, I had to get up at 5 a.m. for this job. Yeah, no thanks, not for me. Anything that is just slightly uncomfortable, anything that is physically demanding, anything that is a little bit difficult for them, it's just not for me. That is a mama's boy trait where they're not going to stick it out. They're not going to push through. The masculine trait is, it's going to require some self-discipline. It's going to require some self-control, but I can do it and I can push through it. Again, the masculine trait is, I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to push through it. Whereas the feminine trait is, let me, again, as Joe said, retreat back to my bedroom, retreat back to the comforting arms of my mother. It's just not a very masculine thing. So, Joe, any thoughts on that? And if not, you can go ahead and get us into okay, how do we help with this? Let's say this is one of our listeners here. What do they need to do?
Yeah. First things first, you have to improve the relationship with the father. I realize this is a nuanced thing. This is very difficult. You go, man, you don't understand my dad. You don't understand how difficult he is. You don't understand what a jerk he is. There's a lot of that out there, and I'm really sorry to say that. There's a lot of aloof dads, and it, in my opinion, is 1,000% on them. Shame on them for not being more involved with the family.
And it does make it tougher.
It does make it significantly tougher. So I'm just going to speak to that right off the bat. But if at all possible, you need to improve the relationship with your father. And the reason this is important is it goes back to, you need to be okay with relationships with men in your life. And your relationship with your dad is often going to show how are you good with, first off, yourself. Your relationship with your dad mirrors your relationship with yourself, but then also with other guys. Is there safety to be found? Is there a level of self-esteem to be found around other men? So improving that relationship with your dad, spending more time with him, pushing to go outdoors with him, pushing it to do woodworking with him, or to be in the garage with him, or to help clean things, or whatever it may be, make sure that you're trying to improve that relationship to the best of your ability. He may be completely aloof. Keep trying for a few times, right? Keep trying. But the other thing that I would say, part two of this would be find a mentor. If he's not going to be that for you, you need to find a mentor, somebody who is willing to show you how to be masculine, somebody who's willing to call you out, maybe an accountability partner, maybe somebody who is going to kind of stick it to you from time to time and tell you the hard things, and it's going to create confidence within you, and it's going to create somebody who is not coddling you, but somebody who's calling you to a higher standard, maybe in a way that your mom is not going to. God bless mothers, correct, right? They're just not going to call you to that higher standard 9 times out of 10 in the way that a man would. You need that as a man.
Yeah, that's great. The next thing I would say, and man, are we ever so big on this with this podcast, do things to improve your self-esteem. Do things to improve your standing with other males. If you're one of those guys that it's like, again, as we've said before, not that muscular, I'm not really good at XYZ, not really good at this or that. Man, work on it. Do things, like, just step out there. And yes, it's difficult. Yes, it's going to be challenging. You're going to be out of your comfort zone. Just get out there and do it. I get passionate about this because so many of the problems that I think young guys have with, again, not being good at this, not being good at that, maybe they don't fit in here. If they would just step out of their comfort zone and try something and just stick to something, commit to going to the gym for 6 months and commit to reading 10 pages a day for a year, whatever it is, you would just come out on the other end so much better. Your self-esteem would be better, but guys don't want to do that. And so this point, again, just get out there and do it. Do things to improve your self-esteem because it is going to force you to step out of your comfort zone, and that is always a good thing for you to do because it's going to push your limits, and your limits, your boundaries are going to grow because you're pushing them. You're extending them as opposed to always staying in your bubble, always staying in your shell. You're never going to improve. You're never going to grow as a man if that's what you constantly revert back to. And so do things to improve your self-esteem. Again, even if it's things you're not necessarily good at, work to improve those things.
Well, I'm going to go right along with that, which is this. I'm going to skip down one, and that's the idea of taking risks.
Yep, absolutely.
Start small, build up. You start on some smaller risk. I'm not expecting you to bungee jump right off the bat if you're risk averse. But you build up to things like that where you take small risks throughout the day. You take small risks with your money. You take small risks with your time, with whatever you may have. Learn to take risks and learn to trust yourself in the process. You find your limitations a lot faster when you're taking risks than when you're coddling yourself or allowing your mom to coddle yourself or to coddle you, while you're in your bedroom playing video games for the 5th hour of the day. Like, you don't understand your limitations and what you can accomplish as a young man when that's taking place. So I would say take risks, just to go on the back of what you were saying.
And I'll go ahead and go to the next one. I think we're going to end up skipping one, Joe, if you want to come back to it. But
I will come back
the next thing I would say, engage in manly things.
Yeah.
Once again, a staple of this podcast. Get out there and play sports. Get out there and work out. Go to the gym. And if you don't want to go to the gym, do your push-ups and sit-ups there at the house. Like, do these manly things. Go hunt. Go fish. Go whatever it is.
Offer to help your dad stain the deck. Offer to power wash the house. Whatever. Yeah.
Mow the grass. Like, again, this is good that we aim this podcast at 15 to 25-year-olds, and I know we have some watchers below that and some above that. That's great. But for those of you who are in that age range, if you're 15, there's so many things I'm sure you could be doing around the house that are incredibly manly. Get out there and go do it. And again, as we're big sports guys, get out there and shoot basketball instead of playing video games for 3 hours. Trust me, it's better for you. Get out in the sun, get out, go walk in the woods, take a hike, whatever it is. Go do these manly things because it will help so much break out of this mold of, again, staying in your comfort zone, looking for the comfort and nurturing of your mother's arms. Get out there and go do these manly things. I mean, I can't really think of anything, else to say on the matter other than you want to be a godly man, go out there and do godly things, but do manly things as well.
Yeah, I love that. I'm actually glad we ended on this one, which is take care of yourself. Do not wait for your mom to do it for you. If your mom is having to tell you to take showers, if your mom's having to tell you to clean your room, if your mom's having to tell you to do your homework, if you are 15 and up and your mom's having to tell you all those things, come on now. Now's the time to take responsibility for yourself. Yeah. Step up. Stop waiting for your mom to get on to you to do what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to, do the chores. You're supposed to clean the dishes, whatever. Hey, son, did you get to that? She shouldn't be having to tell you this time and time and time again, where you're creating this resentment. Like, I don't want my mom to tell me this. She's so mean. She wouldn't have to be mean if you were stepping up and doing it yourself. I realize this is difficult, but one of the best things I'd say to stop being a mama's boy is be self-ruled. Yes, have your dad, a lot of times, let's just be honest, your dad's probably not going to be the one that's going to call you up in a lot of ways. He's not going to call you to that higher standard because a lot of dads are aloof. Just calling it as I see it. The mom is the one that wants her boys to reach the higher standard, so she's going to stay on top of them time and time and time again. Did you get these grades? Did you do this? Did you do that? All the stuff that the dad should be doing as he calls his son up, but that's not happening. Call yourself to that higher standard for the sake of, I know I can do it. I'm going to be the best that I can be, and I don't need my mom telling me that I can be the best in order for me to push myself to be the best. If your mom is having to rule your life and you're starting to feel this kind of pull of like, man, mom's always telling me what to do, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe it's because you're not self-ruled and you're not taking ownership of the things you ought to take ownership of. So the last thing I want to say is take care of yourself. Stop waiting for your mom to take care of you. Stop waiting for her to be your alarm clock and your to-do list and your reminders and everything else. That's not her role. Your role is to step up on your own and to be the man you're supposed to be. And then praise your mom to death. Get her a nice card for her birthday or Mother's Day or whatever it may be, and let her know how much you think of her. But let her know, I don't need you to be the man for me. I'm going to be the man, and I'm going to let you be the mom who loves me and who's I come back and she's going to hug me when I get home from school. Whatever it may be, that's fantastic. Let her be the mom role, but you step up in the ways you're supposed to as a man. Because that's what God's calling us to, is to take care of ourselves in this situation.
I dare not infringe on that beautiful wrap-up. That was really, really good, as always. And so we will stop right there. This has been episode 69. Again, we would encourage you, if you're listening, drop a comment. Or if you're watching, I should say, on YouTube, drop a comment. If you're listening on the podcast app, run to YouTube and drop a comment. Let us know if you got episode suggestion topics. Let us know if you've just got a thought you want to add to the episode. We do read and monitor everything, and we have been getting some episode suggestions. I had somebody reach out to me the other day via text and said, hey, y'all should do an episode on this. So be looking for that. We definitely add them to the list. We might not get to them immediately, but we are very thankful for our Godly Young Men podcasts, faithful, the watchers and listeners. And so we'll be back next week with episode 70. Cannot believe it. Already on episode 70. We are just again, just going through the year, consistently putting out some content. And so we appreciate those of you who make it possible and those of you who give us the reason to do it. So with that, we will be back next week for episode 70 of the Godly Young Men podcast. Thank you for watching and listening.